What's up, everybody? Matt Kajeski here, back again with the Stokastic DFS channel. And today, here to talk about some college football DFS. On Monday, December the 26th, it's New Mexico State taking on Bowling Green. I do not remember what they're calling, whatever you want to call this bowl, but we're going to talk about it from a showdown perspective. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you today by No House Advantage. They're bringing you a new and unique way to play player props, and they're giving you a first match deposit bonus up to $100. But here's how it works. They have two varieties of ways you can play. First one is versus the house, just like it sounds. You're making lineups of player props and taking them against the listed props on the site. The other way you can do this, they have pick'em contest. This is essentially you versus other people in a tournament. You're making lineups of player props, putting them on a confidence interval. And if you beat other people, you get the prizes. These are some big prizes too. They've had prizes up to $25,000. And the best part about it is they're often overlaying. That means the contests aren't always filling, but they're still paying out the same amount of prizes, which can be big for your bankroll. So check them out. Again, first match deposit bonus up to $100. Click the link in the video description below. Let's dive into this game. We'll bring you to the data usage tool behind the scenes. Probably the most difficult game to evaluate in all of bowl season. Bowling Green is a 3.5-point favorite here. The total 48.5. I've seen this come down a little bit, but still pretty healthy for a showdown slate. Overall, New Mexico State is 122nd in pace. They only pass 40.5% of the time, just shy of 41%. Bowling Green is the opposite. They're 79th in pace, but they throw the ball 54% of the time. So a lot heavier on the pass for Bowling Green. Okay, let's try to decipher what we can from New Mexico State. First of all, both defenses are bad, but they have not used a consistent quarterback. New Mexico State, that is. Diego Paiva has been the player they've used most recently. And it's very hard to decipher this because, New Mexico State has played two FCS teams in the last 4 games. They played Missouri and gotten crushed. And then they played Liberty, a game they won and crushed them. So it's been a bunch of blowouts for them. And they've used multiple quarterbacks throughout the year. But when games have been competitive, they've shown a willingness to play more Paiva. Otherwise, if it gets out of hand one way or the other, you'll see probably a decent amount of Gavin Frakes. Paiva is a lot more interesting to me because he's mobile. 443 yards on the year. Only averages 116 as a passer, but again, these are muddled just because you haven't seen one consistent quarterback. For reference, we'll talk about Mac McDonald in a little bit here, but on the back end in our projections, we currently have Paiva for 85% of the snaps, and at 85% of the snaps, he projects better than Matt McDonald straight up, and that's because of the rushing ability. But if you think he plays 70, Matt McDonald's probably the better play in a vacuum. If you think he plays 100, Diego Paiva, he's going to be pretty solid here, price adjusted. And again, this comes down to he runs. McDonald does not. In the run game, it's essentially a 2-man committee between Jamani Jones and Star Thomas. We have Star Thomas for a slight edge in carries right now. A slight edge in targets, and Jamani Jones for a slight edge in carries. And it's going to be close. If you look at the touches between these players, it's Jamani, 111 on the year, Star Thomas, 110 on the year. They've ebbed and flowed back and forth. Star's been a little more efficient as a rusher, 39 yards per game for him, Jamani Jones at 31. As a receiver, it's Star Thomas, slightly more efficient, 133 yards, Jamani Jones, 70. So it's kind of across the board here. But if you're looking just for the cheaper play, it's Jamani Jones, knowing that it's going to be very close. You'll also see players like Amante Watkins play a little bit. Tim Gans hasn't played in their last 2 games, but he was a bigger part of the offense prior to that. And Omari Samuels, he popped up for 4 carries in the last game, probably a function of the slaughtering that we saw of Valparaiso. So to sum all this up, looking mostly at Jamani, but Star could be a pay up to be contrarian. Amante Watkins, even as the change of pace, 3rd string back, 6,600 is just way too expensive for him. I'd rather throw a flyer on like Samuels or something. The receiving game, oh man, they're using about 8 players. Let's start with receiver. The 2 most active receivers on this team are Cordell David and Jonathan Brady. From a route perspective, nobody has more than 400 receiving yards this year. So take most active with a grain of salt for the most part here. Pulling up their route rates right now. I accidentally had Bowling Greens up first, so excuse me here. But on the year, Cordell David, he has a 63% route rate. And then you have Jonathan Brady at 59, Justice Powers at 69. So I think I mixed that up a little bit. Based on the routes and the yardage, Justice Powers should probably be the most expensive receiver on this team, and he's 7,200, which means he's probably the preferred play if you're getting to this. From there, I think David's your number 2, just above 60% of the routes on the year. He's been up above 80% in competitive games, 24 yards per game. He's probably 2, but he's just way too expensive. And then Brady there, 3, 2.9 targets per game, 22 yards, only 261 total yards. You could get to him too. I think it's fine, but ultimately they're going to rotate more than just these 3. Wide receiver 4, Bryce Childress has a 26% route rate on the year. He has 207 receiving yards on 2 targets, 4,500. You could play him. Other receivers to know: Chris Bellamy, he has a 37% route rate, and he's the stone minimum. I think you could play him. He's the 5th most targeted receiver. Jordan Parker, he has a 21% route rate. That's been really low lately. He's probably a guy I'm not playing outside of big tournaments. But you're also going to see Terrell Warner. He has a 19% route rate. And from there, we get to the tight ends, which are another disastrous rotation. Thomas Wisford leads the position with a 44% route rate. J.J. Jones is second, 21%. Eric Marsh third at 7%. And then even Trevor Stevens plays at 6%. You can tell this is a complete and utter disaster for these teams. To sum it all up in terms of ranking, among the expensive receivers, it's Powers 1, David 2, Brady 3. Then we'll go Bellamy 4 for price, Bryce Childress 5. Tight ends, I'm probably not playing any of them. To be frank, the leader, Wisford, has 15 targets. I'd rather play Bellamy. Bowling Green, far more clear. So let's talk about them. Matt McDonald. The reason he doesn't project better than Paiva is he doesn't run. He is negative 35 yards on the ground this year, takes a lot of sacks, 35 sacks, only 23 scrambles. That's not great. And he only averages 239 passing yards per game on 34 attempts. So with a tight spread here, both defenses are bad. You're getting McDonald projected a little bit behind Paiva. Again, that's volatile. If you gave Paiva like 50% of the snaps, McDonald would project ahead of him. But all this to say, McDonald's expensive. This is a huge price to pay for him on both DraftKings and FanDuel. $16,200 on DraftKings. That makes him the most expensive captain on the slate. You can capture most of him just by playing the pass catchers. So I'll play a lot of McDonald, but he's not a guy I'm forcing into the captain by any means. Backfield here is another 5-way committee. Fortunately, we have a bit of clarity. Jason Patterson has been playing the lead back role lately, and he's kind of actually taken some receiving game from Teron Keith. Keith hasn't received a carry in 3 straight games, but he's been playing. He has 7 targets over the last 2, but last game, I should say, the routes were even between Patterson and Keith. And Patterson's cheaper. He has a much higher touch ceiling and floor, frankly. 11.5 touches a game for Patterson, 6.9 for Keith. I'm playing Patterson straight up here, and he looks like one of the better price-adjusted plays on the board. From there, the RB3 is Jamal Johnson, mostly coming via carries. He only has 8 targets all year. He's cheap, so I could see playing Jamal Johnson. No issues playing with him and another back together. Nick Mosley and Payshawn Wimberly are the 4 and 5. They will get some work, but very, very minimal here. These are just your dart throws in tournaments if you need to play somebody the stone man. But again, there's a couple other guys I think you could get to regardless. The receiving game, this is far more clear than New Mexico State, thankfully. It's basically Odu Hilaire is the alpha. He averages 6.8 targets per game, 59 yards. He has a 21% target share. That's completely fine. No issues with Hilaire at his price. And honestly, I think in a vacuum, I would rather play him than McDonald because you're getting a lot of McDonald with Hilaire anyway. The wide receiver 2 has been Tyrone Broden. He's a player that has a 71% route rate, but it's been up above 80% consistently the last couple games. He's second on the team in receiving yards at 473. Also expensive. I'm trying to find the 600 on DraftKings to get to Hilaire if I'm playing one of these guys. FanDuel, it's a bit more of a conversation where he's 2,000 cheaper. And I think instead of playing Broden, you might just play the tight end Christian Sims on DraftKings and save yourself nearly $5,000. He actually has more targets than Broden on the year, but he's a tight end, so not as efficient. The yardage for Sims is 402, and again, for Broden, it's 473, but you're not really sacrificing a lot here. I think Sims is completely fine. And then the actual wide receiver 3 for this team is CJ Lewis, route rate at 63%. He ebbs and flows a little more than Broden and Hilaire, but I think he's completely fine at 6,000. Another guy that's just giving you salary savings. And he's 352 yards on the year. That's 29 per game. It's not that far below Broden. You can save nearly 10K by going down to him. But they'll rotate a little bit too. So for your large field GPP players, here's some of the other players that are going to get snaps. Kevon Kroom, he has not played recently, so just watch his status. He has a 27% route rate on the year, but he missed their last game. That's worth noting. Austin Osborne also returned from injury recently. He's been around 15 to 20% of the routes, so I think you could throw a flyer on him. Maybe he sees more work now that they've had a month off. And then they'll use 2 tight ends a fair amount. The player they use most is Harold Fannin. He has a route rate of 28%, and he actually has 23 targets on the year. That's the same as Kroom, just behind Keith and CJ Lewis. I think Fannin is a bit too expensive here for the tight end 2 at 7,800. I'd rather play the tight end 1 and Christian Sims for a little bit more, or go down and play CJ Lewis and these other cheap receivers instead of them. But that should do it. Hopefully that's a semi-comprehensive breakdown of New Mexico State Bowling Green. On the way out, leave a thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. That helps us a ton, so thank you if you've done that. You can follow me on Twitter at Matt_Gajeski. Apologize for the lighting today. I'm in my childhood bedroom. Back tomorrow, so we'll have regular lighting, regular viewing from here on out. But it's a busy week for bowls. We're covering every single game, DFS and betting, so make sure to check those out. Until then, good luck. We'll see you guys later.